live? It's a live broadcast, we got 3 women bosses. Courageous conversation in EdTech is awesome. Telling you to speak your truth, there might not be closure. A little something Glenn Singleton probably told you. Dr. Winniker's the diva with the knowledge. Victoria Thompson, that tech life, she's all about it. Nearpod, FlowCab, Flipgrid, Microsoft. But Creator Bunsey, it's kinda hard to say them all. Last but not least, we got Melody McAllister, talking pedagogy in the classroom, so turn it up. You're in tune to the best thing going down. Ladies, are you ready? Tell us what we need to know about. Schools, no doubt, is in session. Take home lessons, count your blessing. Thanks to them, it's less guessing. There's no question, these ladies got respect. Courageous conversations in EdTech. Out.
Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Melody McAllister. I'm a mother, educator, author, blogger, consultant for a few of my jobs, and I'm so excited to be here with my co-host, whom I'll introduce in just a moment. If you're just tuning in for the first time, we are so glad you're here. You can check out our previous episodes at bit.ly/MJMcCallie which is on our ticker below. We want you to check them out as they will help you understand our whole mission of how important it is to vet resources so that curriculum does not harm and cause trauma to any of our students, but especially those who have been historically marginalized. And we want to share our platform with educators and EdTech companies who have a mission of ensuring equity and anti-racist practices in the classroom and the school communities in which they serve. So thank you again for joining us today, and we hope you leave feeling more empowered as an anti-racist educator. And just take note that we may experience some tech issues, but we're just going to keep rolling and going. And I would like to introduce you now to my co-host, Victoria Thompson. Victoria, can you share about your background and your mission as an educator?
Yes, so hi everybody, my name is Victoria Thompson. I'm super excited to be here with y'all today. I am based in Tacoma, Washington, which is suburb-ish of Seattle. I started my educational journey as a 5th and 6th grade math and science teacher in Charleston, South Carolina. We moved over to Washington in about 2019. And my role has kind of taken on a couple different things. I'm an education consultant for companies that are tech related in the Seattle area, and also some big tech companies here as well. My current job is that of a STEM instructional coach. So I help schools uplift STEM in their respective spaces, as well as project-based learning as a vehicle for equity. I'm an author and I'm a blogger. I do a lot of other stuff, and I am NCCE, which is the Northwestern Council for Computer Education's newest learning specialist as of last week.
Yay!
So that's a little
Congratulations!
I wanted to share first, which is awesome. But that's a little bit about me. And again, anti-racist tech and just being anti-racist with EdTech is very important to me. As a Black woman, being in lots of different school spaces, we want to make sure that our kids are getting the most out of their education. We can't do that unless we're inclusive and unless we're including everybody. And that's why conversations like this, I think personally, are so important. So I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Eileen Winokur.
Thank you, Victoria. I am Dr. Eileen Winokur, and I've lived in Kuwait since 1984. It's the middle of the night here, but these conversations are so important. I go to sleep, I wake up, and then I go back to sleep. I'm a professional development specialist, and I support teachers globally, including refugee teachers. Prior to retiring from full-time work in 2019, I was a teacher and administrator for 25 years here in Kuwait. I blog and I have a podcast called Journeys to Belonging. And I'm also an author to be. All of that focuses on the importance of feeling a sense of belonging. I'm an ally and I'm constantly learning, especially with these lovely ladies, and open to change based on what I learn. And so I'd like to also, now that I've introduced myself, I'd like to also introduce our guidelines and our guiding principles, which come from Glenn Singleton's book, Courageous Conversations About Race, a Field Guide for Achieving Equity in Schools. The first one is staying engaged. So it's important to stay engaged, meaning that these conversations are courageous and sometimes uncomfortable, but we need to stay in the conversation, continue listening, continue engaging with whoever we're talking to make sure that we make the most of the conversation. We also sometimes we experience, not that we want to, but sometimes we experience discomfort because we are challenged, our basic beliefs in certain things are challenged. We want to make sure that we stay centered and we continue to listen. And even if we experience that discomfort, we want to also speak our truth and make sure that others feel comfortable enough to speak their truths. And in order to be able to move forward and understand each other better, we might not convince each other of our own opinions, but it's important to stay engaged and stay within the conversation. And lastly, expect and accept non-closure. Often we walk away from these conversations and we don't have full closure about whether we agree, we disagree, we've come to any conclusions, but that's okay. The conversations continue, and that's why we have these conversations every month. Let me also just quickly say that the norms we follow facilitate productive conversations that grow us, but we are not affiliated with Glenn Singleton, nor do we or our guests make any profit from these conversations. And Victoria, I'm really excited to have we've got awesome guests. So I'm going to give it back to you so you can go ahead and introduce them.
Yeah, so we've got 5 fabulous guests that are going to be joining us today. And the first you might know from Twitter. He is on Twitter as Inclusive Joe B. He is my friend Joe, and he is a fellow friend and Microsoftie. Very excited to have him here today. And if you take a look, he is Worldwide Senior Business Strategy Manager for K-12 Education, which again, very exciting. And also great that we have him here to talk about driving inclusive solutions. So welcome, Joe. And I see you're here now.
Thank you for having me, Victoria. Very happy to be here.
Course. Anytime. So one of the questions that we're just kind of opening with our guests is, why is anti-racist education important to you? So could you speak a little bit, one, about, of course, who you are, what you do, because I kind of gave an intro, but I'm not you, right? So you can speak on it some more. And then why is anti-racist education important to you as an adult?
Thank you very much for allowing me and just the invite to come and speak with your audience. I am born and raised in Seattle. I am Northwest at heart. I love the trees and the rain and the water. Have traveled and will always come back here. I spent, before starting at Microsoft, I spent 12 years working in special education specifically, and have learned a lot in that time right there. And I think many of the lessons I learned there actually lead into how I view anti-racism. I was a para. I had my own self-contained special education classroom at a local district, and learned that it is important to actually redo and put new structures in place to help students. And part of the work that I did there was create a way for peers to build actual personal relationships with the kids in my classroom, to get to know them, not as people to come and help, but to just build a relationship with. And those relationships have opened up the classroom, opened up the school experience for my students, but also opened up the minds and the perspectives of the students that came through, to where they started to think inclusively. They started to think about what they could do specifically to add to the experience of the students that were in my classroom. And it's one of those things where when I think about it, thinking about anti-racism work in education, it's very important, because none of the work that we did, nothing that they did for my students in my classroom took that experience or the education or the opportunities or the privilege or anything away from any other students. It only added to the openness of my kids in my classroom, and it added to the perspectives and the experiences of those that did that work for them. So no one lost out, and everybody got to gain. And it actually added another vocational skill that they were able to build up into the high school. It added more opportunities for those students, and it opens up more doors when they did these things. So anti-racism is a very important thing, because when you do equity work, you can't really draw the line. Equity has to be, you have to be working for everyone. And I remember working in special education, one of the things that I enjoyed about it was that building that relationship with my students, there was a part of me that was like, I don't think they see me as a Black teacher. I think they just see me as their teacher. And that was really, really rewarding for me at some point and some depth of level, because they might have struggled with other teachers, they might have struggled in the past, but being able to build a relationship, it was a genuine relationship, and being able to build some of that growth in there had, when you don't understand social cues or cultural differences, then it really is that person-to-person connection. And I think that's on one level, one of the things that I enjoyed about special education as well. And I want to make sure everybody has time to speak. But one thing that my manager said once when talking about trying to answer the questions about what do we mean by inclusion? Do we mean gender inclusion? Do we mean racial inclusion, cultural? He said, we're going to have a inclusive definition of inclusion, right? Which means yes to all of it. And I always push that to the equity work. We are going to do equity work for everyone, right? And it can seem like you're trying to solve all the world's problems, but it is necessary to work towards equity for everyone, right? And you have to do that. And especially with a company like Microsoft, who has a vision of empowering every person on the planet, we really have to lean into what we mean by every person. And so you have to do the work for every person to do that. So it's very important to me. It's very important to, I think, the work that I do on some level, and especially focusing on students in any way. You really do need to focus on all students and doing the things that we can for them.
That was powerful.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. Eileen, do you have anything to add before we go to our next guest?
No, go ahead. It was really awesome.
Yeah, completely agreed. All right, so we have fabulous guest number 1, check. Now we are on to fabulous guest number 2, and we are going to introduce Jordyn. So, head of educator innovation at Flipgrid, and also at Savvy Educator on Twitter. So just speak a little bit again about yourself, who you are, and then why is anti-racist education important to you?
Yes, hello everyone, and thank you for being a part of this conversation, because I am so happy that we're having this much needed conversation. My name is Jordyn Armand. I'm originally from New Orleans, Louisiana, where I began teaching second grade students. And from there, I felt that I needed to work a little bit more hand in hand with educators, since that was what I was doing anyway. Became an administrator, found my love in instructional coaching, started working for an Alabama State Department of Ed initiative centered around technology. So that was a great opportunity for me to do anti-racism work with technology across multiple school districts in Alabama. And then I found my way to Flipgrid. And so I'm so happy that I get to continue out my personal mission and just ensuring that educators have what they need to really meet the needs of all students. And that first and foremost is centered around anti-racist work. So when I hear that question, what does anti-racism mean to me? It starts with self. So as a Black woman, I saw from a very early age the things that were for me and the things that were against me. And as a person of color, I internalized a lot of those things. And I definitely never really gave my whole self or best self in situations where I did not feel included. And so when I think about our students and I think about the systems that are in place in education, this work should come first and foremost for any educator. If you truly believe in meeting the needs of all of your students, you have to recognize what systems that you are surrounded by that are not for every child. And so the work that I get the pleasure of doing with Flipgrid is to, once again, just provide an avenue for educators to learn more and to grow, because we also need to grow. We need to recognize the things that we don't know, and we have to grow together. So I do have a resource that hopefully we will share. Microsoft had a great team to come together and put together a learning path all about anti-racist work. And and so I'm so excited that I'll actually be facilitating a professional learning community for any educator who wants to go on this journey collectively. I believe in collective efficacy, and the more that we can go on those journeys together, have those conversations together, the more that we will be equipped to do this work in the right way. And if we make a mistake, that's okay. We just learn from it, and we grow from those things. So that's why anti-racism is just so important to me in education.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I believe
that's amazing.
Yeah, I think that beneath that link is there, and I'm sure Melody will drop it into the comments and chat box. So if anybody wants to go ahead and sign up, I mean, I'm super excited. So that sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's wonderful that you'd be able to dive in deeper. Yeah. You know, sometimes we want to use the tools, but we really don't know how to use them in our classrooms in order to be effective in the way that we want them to be effective. And as Joe was saying a little while ago about, you know, being all inclusive to everyone, and also being all, you know, to be equitable to everyone. So yeah, that's awesome, Jordyn.
And, you know, I just have to say, in my grad school program, I was in a program called the Louisiana Leader Fellows when I was getting my master's degree. And this Courageous Conversations book was one of our texts. So once again, looking at the programs that you choose to attend when it comes to education, look at what resources are being used. What are the conversations centered around? You know, I think as educators, we have to question those things too. So I just wanted to put that out there, that I love that this conversation is just guided by just the content in that book. And it's important to stop and recognize that we need to like slow down and have these conversations so that we can understand various perspectives, but then also, again, when it comes to equity, do everything that we can to dismantle those systems so that we can get a more equitable world.
Absolutely. Right on. 100%. Oh, this is so great. Okay. Fabulous guest number 1 and 2. Check. Now we are going to have fabulous guest number 3. And I'm really excited to have her on today. Miss Jordyn. Hey, girl. How's it going?
I am so excited to be here. You know, I forgot that I was a part of the panel. I was like in the background, like, I forgot I was a part of the panel for a second. But thanks for having me. I'm so super excited.
Yes. Yeah, sometimes it's kind of fun to like hang back and see what other people are saying. And then when you're brought on, you're like, wait, like a moment of consciousness, you know, where you remember you're part of it. So as always, just like before, tell us a little bit about who you are and then why anti-racist education is important to you.
So I'm Jordyn Jalaba. Above anything else, I'm an educator. I teach 10 through 12th graders, ages 16 to 21, which a lot of people have never really heard of before. They're called transfer school students here in Brooklyn, New York. And I just want to get straight into this topic of anti-racism. First, it's important for us to acknowledge that systemic racism exists everywhere. It exists in our curriculum, which is our schools, organizations that we may work for, our communities. And so when we think about anti-racist work, we have to think about the community itself, the people that's within that community and the people that surrounds that community. So why it's important to me is because my students are the heart of my community. I work at a school that they call, you know, the historic Bedford-Stuyvesant School. This is a school that I graduated high school from. And so going back to teach it was just like, oh, I want to be that teacher that makes a difference. And then they handed me the curriculum. I was like, what is this? You know? Yeah. And as a student, you know, you can't really question things. It's just like, oh, okay, my teacher is teaching me this. Oh, okay. But as a teacher, you're just like, this does not include the kids that are sitting in my class, which at that time was just like, you know, 35 students per period. And I felt like there was a need for change. And so I started to just really create curricula, create lessons that are centered on my students. So when we talk about culture responsive teaching, and that's very similar to, you know, Jordyn and Joe, when they were talking about just building this inclusive environment for students, that's what I really had to do. I had to acknowledge that at one point, the school system failed to include students who were of color, and it still fails to include, Native Americans, Asians, Blacks, Latinos. And so in creating a culturally responsive teaching curriculum, it was almost like, now let's be forthright, let's be honest, let's be truthful. There were some things that people forgot to say. There were some things that people forgot to teach our students. And so let me be the one to say it. As I mentioned, my students' ages ranges from 16 to 21, which means by the time they enter my classroom, they have taken U.S. history at least 4 times in other schools. Right. And I'm going to let that sit in for the audience. So that means I'm their 5th teacher. So they've bounced in and out of the juvenile justice system. They've bounced in and out of shelters. They've bounced in and out of schools. And by the time they get to me, some of them are actually 21 years old, which means they only have a few months to attempt to graduate. And once they sit in the classroom, it's almost like, okay, so what did you learn about history? As a matter of fact, what did you learn about you? Where do you fall in? Where does your family fall into this? And some students can't tell you that. If you discuss Rosa Parks or Martin Luther King with my students, they just tell you the basic facts that you learned in elementary school. And for me, that's disheartening. So the way I tackle, or the way I implement strategies for anti-racism is just being, that honest teacher that says, let's find out, where were the Black people during this era? Where was your family during this era? And what can we do so that, you feel included into this classroom? So instead of just putting up posters in my room of random people, I have to create, timelines where my students feel like they're walking into history and they're making something for themselves in the future.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's amazing. Yes, they need to see themselves in the curriculum. Otherwise, like you said, they don't know what really happened, and they don't see their own histories. So making that history come to life is really awesome, Jordyn.
Mm-hmm. And you touched on it, but there's a lot of just revisionist history that goes on in K-12 curriculum in particular. Where it's very whitewashed and it's through a very white lens. And then our students, like for example, African American history begins at slavery in most, K through 12 education, when we know that there were things prior. Right. And I remember when I was science and math, we encounter things like aliens built the pyramids, right? Because Black and brown people obviously can't be mathematicians and scientists. Right. The only ones we learn about are Isaac Newton and Pythagoras, and we call it a day. So I do want to say, if you do not follow Jordyn on Twitter, please make sure that you do. She shares lots of wonderful resources. And I believe that Melody dropped the link to those resources that are there. And I'm sure she'll drop it again. But yeah, she's just a wealth of knowledge, and you are missing out if you do not follow her. So please make sure that you do.
Thank you.
Yeah, anytime. All right, so we're kind of like Flipgrid Palooza right now, because we've had 2 Flipgrid folks, and now we're going to have another. So this is going to be our 3rd Flipgrid folk, but our 4th overall, and we are going to be introducing Miss Ann Cosma.
Hey, hello. Thank you for having me on tonight.
Yes, of course. Thanks for being here. So you probably know the drill by now. Name, who you are, and then why anti-racist education is important to you.
Yeah, so my name is Ann Cosma, and I work on Jordyn's team. I'm one of the educator innovation leads on Team Flipgrid at Microsoft, and former 1st grade teacher and kinder through 8th innovation TOSA in my district in Southern California, and a lifelong learner. And I think to me, that is my driving force in the work that I do to help others lean in and learn on. And I think as I think about this question, why is anti-racist education important to me? I think back to the years of professional development where I did not have access to professional development and anti-racist work. And folks were not talking about culturally responsive teaching, and the absence of this conversation for so long in professional development for educators is why I'm so excited to be leaning in and being a part of these courageous conversations, recognizing in myself, I have so much to learn. What did I miss, or what was I conditioned into oblivion to not see in my own experience? And I think back to my education, and I have one experience, one memory from my childhood, and I'm pretty sure my 5th grade teacher must have seen when Peggy McIntosh was on Oprah, and they did that conversation about white privilege and unpacking that invisible knapsack, and her coming into our classroom and having these conversations about race. Fast forward to my early 20s, and having somebody challenge me to think about what I am or am not aware of. And so I am hopefully helping others lean into conversations and be open to re-examining what their own perspective is, right? I think back to something that, Jordyn said, it starts with us, right? And I think that's why I'm so passionate about this, is if we don't have these conversations and celebrate this beautiful diversity that we all exist in, we're just going to be doomed to continue to repeat the past. And that's just going to be this horrific cycle that we never, ever, ever break out of. And we have to break that cycle. So having a conversation like this helps us all realize major parts of the story have not been told. And how can we include all of that as we grow forward together? Otherwise, we're doomed. We're doomed.
Completely agreed.
Yeah.
All right.
Amazing. The point that I really focused in on, I mean, everything that you said was terrific, Anne. But is the whole idea of being conditioned. What if we, especially as the white majority, what have we been conditioned to see that we don't, we sort of have these blinders on and we don't see outside those blinders? And how do we remove those blinders so that we see everything that's going on? So awesome.
Well, and one last point on that is something that we have to confront in ourselves, and it's not always comfortable, but it's okay to sit in that discomfort and ask, how can this change me and help me learn and help me grow forward doing anti-racist work as an ally? So experiencing that or sitting in our own discomfort sometimes, it's okay to do that. We need to do that.
We do. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks.
100%. Agreed. Everyone's just saying so many great things.
Oh, gosh, yes.
Yes. So speaking of that, we've got our last but not least guest. We've got John Smith from the Book Creator team. So hi, John.
Hi.
All right.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, of course. Of course, you know the drill by now. We've gone through 4 guests. Name, what you do, why anti-racist education is important to you.
Well, first, I wasn't nervous one bit until now. Like after everybody said all of these amazing things, I almost just left because I was like, I don't know. Like, I think this is really good. So I don't know what else I can say that's even better than that. But no, my name is John Smith. I was kind of like Joe, a special ed teacher for 12 years. I was a tech integration specialist after that for 7 years, and now I'm the teacher success manager at Book Creators. So really excited about these conversations and honored that you guys invited me to this show. So like when I think back about when I started teaching, I'm going to kind of piggyback off of what Joe said because we kind of have similar stories. And as a special ed teacher, when I went through school, like I honestly, like at first I didn't even want to do it. Like I got the part of the degree that I needed to have my special ed license because I thought it would be good information for me to learn, about all students. And I enjoyed it, but I was nervous and scared, and I didn't want to teach special ed. So I even left it off my resume for for years, right? Like in months, and I couldn't get a job, and I finally got a job as a special ed teacher, and I was like, well, at least I'll get my foot in the door, right? That'll be enough, and then I can go do what I really want to do. And I found out quickly that I couldn't have been more wrong. Like special ed students in general, just students who struggle, are my favorite kids. Like those are the ones that I really enjoy. Working with and trying to figure out what makes them, tick, and what makes them, what kind of stories they have to tell. We're all talking about stories, and I think that's what is the most important piece for me, is that we all have a story to tell. And if we don't have that, if we don't tell that story, then like Ann said, there are missing pieces, right? Like, or we just get, a third of the conversation. We don't get the whole thing. And for me, like Joe, that's what started. It started with my own kids, and honestly, I didn't really believe in them at first, and I struggled with that because I was like, I can't reach these kids, I can't get them to do any work, and I realized that the reason that this was happening is because they weren't given a chance to tell their story. And they weren't given a chance to show what they know outside of this tiny little box that I believed was learning and education. And so being able to open the doors to my students and allow them to, share their story through bookmaking was an experience that was unbelievable to them. And it was something I hadn't experienced, and we experienced it together. And I realized that when they were able to share their story and share their voice with people around the world, then it changed them, because they were like, well, wait a minute, my voice can be heard. It doesn't have to be silenced in the classroom. It doesn't have to be, told I'm wrong because this teacher believes something about me that isn't true. We all have something. And for me, that was huge. And I just, I teach a graduate class, and I've gotten into not necessarily fights, but I've gotten into like moments where I'll say something or I'll share a piece of technology, and I'll start to see people be like, well, so-and-so can't do it. And I'm just like, ooh, like I just want to jump across the table and like get in a fist fight with somebody, because I'm like, it's not true, right? Like, and I think that's what's important, is we all have something to share. And if we don't, then we're just missing all of the story. And so I think that's, we need to have the most, accurate information before we start pointing fingers and we start saying things that aren't true.
Right. I think my dog was very moved by your words, because he decided to hop up on my lap and learn a little bit more. So we officially have Ren as part of the podcast today.
Yeah.
Hey, you know what? That's one thing I can say, right? The dogs enjoy watching John Smith on TV. So,
Yeah.
I love that.
I think, John, also what you're talking about relates closely to the other speakers too, is that telling your story, but having those vehicles to tell the story, like Book Creator, where all students have the opportunity to tell the story in the way they're able to and the way they want to create. Yep, and that's absolutely what makes it so accessible and so inclusive. And so I'm sure we'll get into that as we continue talking about the actual tech tools that we're talking about today.
Yep.
Yeah. Great.
Thanks, John.
Yeah, thanks, John.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. Oh, and we're supposed to say that Mel has worked with you for a while, for several years on Book Creator, John. Yeah. So yes, so that's the connection, because we all sort of have connections here too.
Oh, right? Gotcha. I just thought I was the odd man out. So yes, I'm glad we have connections. No.
You're all definitely connected. Don't worry about it. Every single one of you.
Yes. Absolutely. All right. So, Dr. Eileen, do you want to kick it off with the first question, since I did the introductions for folks?
Absolutely. And those introductions blew me away. So thank you all very
much.
Right? I'm so excited to have all of you. The next question that we consider, and again, just like Mel had said before we got started, the conversation can kind of veer off. We don't have to stay to a script. But the next question sort of guides us is, how does the EdTech company you work for embody anti-racist education? So obviously we're having these courageous conversations. When we started these courageous conversations back in October or November, we sort of set the stage for how do we validate, how do we go about choosing tech tools and knowing which tech tools really are inclusive, cover all of that, equitable, accessible, and so forth. So specifically for Flipgrid, Book Creator, and Microsoft, how does that relate to enabling the discussion of anti-racist education and changing the system, as has been mentioned by several guests?
Mm-hmm.
And so whoever
first.
wants to start, go ahead.
Right.
I don't want to be last this time. I'm going right now. So
go ahead, John.
I think what makes Book Creator is that it doesn't just assume anything about anybody. It's just a blank canvas, and you have the ability to share your story in any way you want, whether that's video or text or audio, or if you want to pull in something else that you made somewhere else, like Flipgrid, right? You want to bring in a Flipgrid, topic, you can put that right inside your book. So it doesn't just assume that you are anything, right? You're there, and you're you, and you can put you onto the page of a book. And I think that's what I like most about it. I think that's how we embody that, is that we don't just assume anything, and we allow everyone, right? We have accessibility features that allow, students and people with, visual impairments and, hearing impairments and things like that to participate. We have transcriptions, and we have audio, and we have captioning and things like that. So I think that that's what, really makes us what we are. And that's what I love most about it.
Well, I'll hop in for Flipgrid. And so for those of you who may not be familiar with Flipgrid, our mission is our community's mission to empower every learner on the planet to share their voice, but also to respect the diverse voices of others. And so we know that there's magic that happens inside of a platform like Flipgrid because of an educator. And so in order for us to really achieve this work, the platform itself is great, but we have other work to do. So our team has made a commitment to even have frequent conversations about race, equity, and justice when it comes to education. Because if an educator doesn't know how to really craft those topics to meet the needs of their students, then using the platform might not make a world of a difference, right? And so bringing up those conversations within the educator space, sharing resources like we're doing today, is one thing that our company truly believes in. In addition to that, inside of Flipgrid, well, if you didn't know either, Flipgrid is 100% free. So thanks, Microsoft, we have a platform that every child, no matter what they look like, your economic background, they have the ability to utilize this tool, not only for learning, but discovering who they are as special people, and then also learning from others. And so inside of Flipgrid, we have this bank of 35,000 topics that educators and our partners have created. And a lot of this work is centered around learning about other people. And so you'll see inside of the Discovery Library that we have a collection called Conversations About Race, Equity, and Justice. You will see Yuritsa's collection of culturally responsive teaching topics. You will see topics centered around celebrating Black history, Hispanic history, Hispanic Heritage Month. You'll see women's history topics. All of this has to do with the work in not only education, but also anti-racist work. So everything that you see with inside of our platform, we try to ensure that it is the most inclusive way for someone to either interact with the platform or learn, with and from the platform as well. And you can go ahead and share about our amazing community conversations too that we have on a weekly basis.
Oh my gosh, yeah. Well, to echo all of that, everything that she said inside of the Discovery Library, I love it. Incredible partners like ADL Education, the Equal Justice Initiative, our good friend Erica Buddington at the Langston League with her Decolonized series. There are resources for everyone. She mentioned before the anti-racist cohort. also as a series of professional learning opportunities. But we also host weekly community conversations where we're inviting, whether they're Discovery Library partners or educators in our community, to come on and talk about best practices, the pedagogy that impacts and transforms learning. We just welcomed Girl Rising and to kick off Women's History Month, but they're talking with very, very serious conversations, whether it is about gender-based violence or domestic slavery, trafficking, those types of things that girls around the world have experienced. These are ways to raise awareness and ignite action. And that's a phrase from Girl Rising, but it transforms and it works for so much of this work that we're trying to do at Microsoft to help empower others. So it's an honor to be a teacher helping teachers, like I said before, lean in and learn on this journey.
Joe or Jaritza, do you want to?
Yeah, I didn't want to talk over anybody, but it is. I want to thank Flipgrid team for sharing all the great. Microsoft does a lot. There's so many resources. There are so many resources. In fact, if you go to Mike Dolson's Twitter page, you can find a wealth of knowledge, and he just continues to spit out stuff that's actually absolutely beneficial. But in regards to what the company, how the company embodies it, I mean, there's the MET course, the resources, the teaching. The thing I love about the MET course on the Microsoft Educator Center is that, like, I went through it, and there it doesn't talk about technology. It is just an amazing resource and a path for the work you have to do internally and how that can translate to your classroom. And it is definitely worth checking out, looking out, much like Flipgrid and many things. It is free, just go look at it. But I think it's also important to know that Microsoft is doing a lot of internal stuff. And I always have the Michael Jackson song in my head of Man in the Mirror. And one of my favorite people I've ever talked to at Microsoft is the Chief Accessibility Officer, the Jenny LeFleury, and getting around that idea of equity as equity, and we need to work for everyone's equity, because some of us who work special education know that kids of color get put into special education more often. And that's a whole other conversation, maybe another conversation around not fitting the mold of education. And so, they need extra help. But that's beside this point. But it is important to know that there's a lot of internal work that's going on at Microsoft. And I give these talks all the time and show what we do internally and how we've changed what we do internally in our processes and how we work and how we think and how that translates to the products and how that turns into something like a deep partnership with Flipgrid to learn about the immersive reader that turns into the immersive reader then being available to partners for free. Like they go add that accessibility to everyone. So we learn and then you kind of scale it, but we learn and then we kind of give that out and we build that platform that allows everybody to do that. We do things like we hire individuals, we hire engineers that have visual impairments, and they build something that actually gets built into the operating system that empowers everybody. One of my favorite features in the operating system is I have a teal cursor that's larger than normal, and I have 20/15 vision. I don't need it, but I love it. And it's something that was not built for me, but it helps me. It's something that I love. And I think that's the other thing is that we do need to focus on a marginalized community, and we do need to help those who need it, because there's somebody who's like, wow, that helps me. I can use that. There's somebody who we're not targeting. There's somebody who we don't know of, but we have to start somewhere and really help them to be able to get to where it is that they're trying to go and to build that voice and to learn those skills and to do the things and to have that agency in what's important. And I think it's important to know that there's a lot of internal stuff going on with Microsoft. And yes, I have a special ed background, so I think accessibility, but also the conversations around equity, racial equity, sexuality, all these kind of conversations are going on to say, how do we open up this conversation to more? How do we showcase our tools, but be thoughtful of everyone? Because many people will say, Microsoft, what do we do? What do we do? And we say, we want to give you the tools to continue learning and to build what's best for your community and best for your people and best for your students and best for who you have to be able to grow, right? And so that is things like, how do we give them a voice and building that in, and how do we support the tools and all the students and the teachers to be able to do this? How do we even look at the data properly to know where we need to invest our time and money, and are we missing? Where do we see the gaps? We don't have the specialness, the specialty or the skills to look at the information and know that we're missing anyone, and having the tools to be able to say, hey, have you thought about this? Have you looked at this? Here's some analytics to kind of help you keep kids from slipping through the cracks. How do you find a student who's at risk of being at risk and helping support them? And there's things that we're doing internally to help that, and how we want to really support that. But I'm very proud of where I work, and it's very few opportunities that anybody gets to work on something that they're passionate and it fits their core values, but also enjoy the people they work with, and they enjoy the company that they work with. And I feel that I've hit a very fortunate place to be in, and in order to really enjoy that from being a former educator, is I try to do as much as I can to share that with everyone else, and to continue to get people to know, it's like, you have access to this. This is stuff that you can do, you can access, and then your kids can build their skills and take wherever we've gotten to, whatever these conversations have gotten to, and continue to take them farther, and build their own skills and everything. And I love to talk, but I try not to talk first. So I want to give somebody else a chance to go, but there's so many opportunities that come up from this. But it is important to know that, especially in a tech company where it's not a great culture, has not historically been a great culture, there's a lot of internal work to really ask ourselves hard questions and have those conversations like this internally, to really do what we can to do better. And we're all really trying to do better. And even though each step is a step, we're trying to keep ourselves from taking a step back and continue to move forward.
So I'll keep it real short, because Jordyn and Ann touched on like all of the wonderful things Flipgrid does. But what comes to mind when I think of Flipgrid, and everyone that knows me knows that I love Flipgrid, but it's because of equity and access. My mentor, when we think about anti-racist work, we're always thinking about the access gap. And for me, it's just, how can my students use this platform if they don't have tablets or computers at home? And Flipgrid always comes to mind because it's a platform that you can integrate with other platforms. So if a student doesn't want to show his face or his background or his current situation, that Flipgrid camera to me is access. It's inclusion. It's a definition of accepting diversity, because not everyone lives in the same situation. Not everyone is experiencing the same thing, especially during this pandemic. So what I would say beyond just the workshops is just how the platform gives students access, even through cell phones. When I think about how fast I could just go onto Flipgrid right now through the app and post something and just give my students the link, I'm thinking about my students who are at work right now on a Sunday at 7:48 and are basically saying, okay, well, I know Ms. V gave me this assignment last Wednesday, but I can do it at work on my cell phone. It has to be that platforms are now thinking about our students, and mostly the ones who are less fortunate. This has always existed, right? This gap in wealth, but how is a platform going to meet that need? And I believe that Flipgrid is that platform, because you can still integrate every other platform with Flipgrid. Like Jordyn always says, if you could think it, you could Flipgrid. And honestly, if a teacher really wants to become a culturally responsive teacher, they'll do the same.
Absolutely, Eureka. And there's just so much incredible. We have this private chat. We're talking about this incredible and awesome conversation so far. Just amazing. So, Victoria, I think we've covered a lot of the tools, but I'm sure there are specific things that are recommendations. So go ahead.
Yeah, our last question was about resources, but y'all already covered it. So I guess for closing, just like how Dr. Eileen said, where can we find you if folks have any questions? And maybe if there's one resource that y'all would recommend for your specific roles and platforms. I think that that would be really cool to close out with.
What I want to share is, I know we've already shared like all of the resources, but my advice to educators is to this side by side with other educators, and don't be afraid to ask questions. So if you are looking through right now, look at this. It's Yuritsa's collection of all of her incredible topics. I encourage you to learn from what Yuritsa has done. What is lacking in her curriculum, she has led as a teacher. We are all leaders as teachers, and we can create topics and find resources for our students that maybe the curriculum is lacking, because we're teaching students, we're not teaching curriculum, we're teaching the students. And so shout out to Yuritsa for all of these incredible topics that she created for her students that she's sharing with the world.
Well, gracias. You know, like, in creating resources, I always keep my students in mind. And sometimes, yes, they're very fun, but I just think about how can I include my students in every single part of my lesson. Even if the activity doesn't end as a Flipgrid activity, I always find a way to create a Flipgrid activity out of it, because I'm always thinking, well, what if my student doesn't have access to the Google Classroom at this place? Or what if my student, couldn't create something on Adobe Spark? Then they still have that option of creating a Flipgrid and simply uploading that, and I can grade that as their project or their assignment. So it's very flexible.
That's wonderful.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the things that we need to look at in terms of equity and inclusion, is how, and accessibility, is in any situation, what tools do the students have at hand and the teachers have at hand that are easy to use, easy to learn, and allow them to speak, to tell their stories, which all of you have been talking about.
Right.
Yeah. One of the other resources, the anti-racism course, you flashed it up there briefly. It's on the Microsoft Educator Center. That in and of itself is a massive and huge resource. It's got learning paths and all kinds of things. There's free courses and ways to get through not just the technology, but how to apply it in the classroom. One of the things I would love you to point people towards is the other link that I shared. It's aka.ms/mech accessibility. And we put it together. It's for special education and accessibility resources for remote learning, like how to even start to try to navigate it. And we put it together, and it just brings things, a lot of that technology together, right? How do we support the different models of specially designed instruction, data collection, creating accessible content, to supports for students, whether it's executive function or mobility, hearing, neurodiversity. And then there's other inclusive practices for all learners, right? Whether you have highly capable and twice exceptional students, early childhood special education, resources for parents, accommodations, modifications, all kinds of things. And so there is a wealth of resources on there. And this one specifically, I want to point people at, because they are things that we wrote specifically for students who access special education, for those educators, and even resource for parents to be able to look through. Because for many times, schools have access to Microsoft tools. They just don't know that, right? Many schools pay for all kinds of things. And if the teachers use Outlook for their email, most likely the students have access to these tools. And so we want to make sure that everybody has the least restrictive environment, right? We do that with special education, but we also want to make sure that we think about this in a way that supports all of our learners. And somebody mentioned Flipgrid being culturally responsive, like a tool. And I love that, because I did go through the book Culturally Responsive Teaching in the Brain, and being able to use the tools in a way that it helps students. They will be using these tools for their jobs, for employment in the future. And if we don't give them the opportunity to use these tools, they won't. They'll be behind the curve. They'll be behind the learning curve, and it won't, even like was it John, so that he used to leave things off his resume. There's skills that kids have they don't know they have, right? And say, hey, Flipgrid skills are skills that you need. You need to be able to get your point across verbally. You need to be familiar with being on camera. Many of us have spent a year engaging with the world like this. So there's a lot of skills and things that are important for kids to build and for us to be able to support as parents and for teachers to be able to weave into the lessons to let them, hey, go search both sides of this argument. Go look into this. Go build an oral history of your family for a family tree. There's all kinds of incredible things that you can do. And we want to make sure that however we can help and support that, we're there to do that.
Yeah, 100%.
I was just going to jump in real quick too, and not only say this conversation, everybody here, our friends, our families, people, our network, our fellow educators, I think that's the resource I want to share. It's having that conversation. It's connecting with people. It's being vulnerable and transparent, maybe in your own learning or what you do or you don't know, and acknowledging that and recognizing that's okay, because we're all evolving and we're all growing and we're all hopefully growing forward. But if you don't know where to start, a place like this is the perfect place. Listen in. Lean in and then join the conversation. So if you have a friend you feel safe talking with, or you have a colleague that is having conversations too, join the conversation, because we are each other's best resources. And as we use these tools we have access to grow forward, that's how we're going to move, right? That's how we're going to move. That's how we're going to raise this awareness and ignite change. So utilizing the power of the connectedness and the power of your community. That's the resource I want to share.
Sometimes the best professional development is done on Twitter, and with learning communities, instead of sitting in a room with a bunch of other people.
Yeah.
And I guess mine just flashed up there on the screen. So I just wanted to share, 230 accessibility improvements have been added to Book Creator, and I'm not going to go into all 230 of them in the next 3 minutes, but there's a lot of important ones in there, from dictation and captions and transcripts and things like that will help all students. But I want to end with my last thought, I guess, more than a resource, because everybody shared some great resources here in Twitter. Absolutely, right? Talk to people, and don't just talk to people that you agree with, right? Talk to all kinds of people so that you can get different views. But I guess I want to end with a challenge, all right? And so I guess my challenge is, my students, when I was in the classroom, would say things to me like, well, we don't like this textbook, or and it was all that we had, right, at the time. And, back then, Twitter wasn't really a thing, and Book Creator wasn't even a thing when I first started teaching. And I guess what my challenge is with my students, they would like, we hate this textbook, we don't like it, it's not, it doesn't represent us. And so then I would always say to them, well, if you think you can do better than a multi-million-dollar textbook making company, then put your money where your mouth is, right? Do something about it. Let's change. And so with these tools, whether it's Flipgrid or Book Creator, any Microsoft tools, anything, right? We have the ability to change. We have the ability to change what's out there and make sure that it is a complete story and not just a Swiss cheese story, right? That has the holes missing. So I think that's what is my challenge to everyone out there, my challenge to the students. If you don't like what's being said, then let's change that. Let's make our own stories, and let's make the not Swiss cheese. Let's fill those holes.
Yeah.
Hey, Mel.
Hey, I just want to say, like, I'm in Alaska. I didn't say that at the beginning. My fingers are cold, and I was trying so hard to drop all the gems. I was so amazed. The conversation was amazing. The resources shared are amazing. I want to thank every single person on our panel for taking an hour of your time and just sharing with us the mission of yourself and the company that you represent. You are amazing educators and leaders, and I'm just so touched. And I also apologize for all the spelling errors I put out there. But one thing that really resonated was what Ann said. that we are each other's best resources. So join the conversation. If this is the first time you've ever joined this kind of conversation, stay with us, see the resources that we dropped, and keep going. And Dr. Eileen said earlier, like, sit in your discomfort, or someone said that if I'm misquoting someone, but sit in that discomfort. Maybe that was Ann too, and just keep pushing. And yeah, it was inspiring. All of you were amazing. Thank you so much for sharing. We will do this again, so watch for us, and we will be having another conversation. We are so thankful that you tuned in with us today. Enjoy your new week in school, and spring break is right around the corner. So we hope that you will get rested and refreshed, and we'll see you next time. Thank you, everybody. Bye.